Members, the question is the bills be read a second time. The Honourable Cole McGinn.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. And I rise today very happy to talk on these two bills and show my support towards them. You know, it's been interesting listening to some of the debate and in particular the references to safety culture and the changes. I always find in these times when I hear these types of conversations that I reflect on my experience in the industry and what I've seen. And as the Honourable Member Alison Zamon pointed out, the MUA has worked very heavily in that space, and I'm proud to say that I was an organiser for the MUA previously. Now, one of the things when I first went offshore in the oil and gas industry on rigs that I found quite interesting, even on the vessels as well, was that before you joined a ship, you would go through rigorous inductions. Rigorous inductions. You know, you could spend, the entire crew could spend an entire day inside a hotel, basically getting the full rundown of the policies and procedures, the way the company's safety record is, how safety is number one, and how safety is the most important thing. And they always say in the induction, in my experience, was that safety comes before productivity. Now, whenever I got onto a job, I found out very quickly that that is the complete opposite to what takes place when you're on the ground. And I've seen it loud and clear in many circumstances. You know, there was a severe disaster in the offshore oil and gas industry in 1988, the Piper Alpha. That resulted in 167 deaths. There was a massive explosion. There was so many things that went wrong in respect of that could have prevented that incident, but it didn't. So there was a major overhaul in respect of safety procedures put in place in the offshore oil and gas industry. We've seen JHAs and toolboxes and all that stuff get injected into the industry. But when you get out onto the job and you see that you're battling to see safety equipment put on board, you know, like we would have arguments around getting new overalls, getting more safety glasses because not everyone had some. Hearing protection, not having adequate hearing protection because it was too loud and above the Australian standard. But the job went on and it didn't stop. But the reason that we weren't getting these things addressed was we were told that it was too expensive. We were told that this cost doesn't justify the expenditure. Now, to me, that's absolute disgrace that we preach, the companies would preach one thing, but when you get out on the job, another thing happens. You know, and I've spoken in this place in my maiden speech about the two fatalities on the Stena Clyde. But I can say, hand on heart in respect of that case, that there were safety issues raised around what was happening in that procedure to try and unstuck the drill from the hole. They were raised by another crew, but yet not brought to the attention of the crew that then performed the task. That was because it was important to get back to production as quickly as they could. When I went from there up to the northwest and started being an organiser for the MUA, from Port Hedland down to Exmouth, the next thing that really got me around safety was how there seemed to be a different standard for directly employed employees compared to labour hire employees. Now, labour hire and third-party contractors, when they go in and perform a role, I believe are subject to a lot more fear and a lot more scrutiny from the employer, because they're also not in the great position of being able to go home each night knowing that they can return to the job the next day. Employers will always, in my opinion, react when it hits their back pocket. The issue of safety that I seen during 2014, 2015, when there was still a lot of work happening in the Pilbara, was there was a lot of fear from people in the labour hire companies to actually raise a safety issue. I would have a union meeting where members would say, this is happening and it's unsafe. Okay, under the Act, you're protected, the OH&S Act, raise it with the HSR, go through the process. Oh, but if I do that, I won't come back because Bill, Ben and Harry did that and they're not working here anymore. And I can say that that wasn't just a one-off thing. That happened at almost every single site that I was looking after in the Pilbara. Then you'd find an employee who took their safety seriously and thought, bugger it, I'm going to put my hand up and have a go. We've seen circumstances where HSRs were let go after raising a safety issue or putting a PIN notice on. where they were supposed to be protected by the Act. When we went into EBA negotiations with employers and we would have an issue with a rostering system where they were working too many hours, there was fatigue management issues, whenever we would raise that with an employer, we would be told, too expensive, never going to happen. Never going to happen. The cost is too expensive. Not a conversation around the fact that we've got employees that have worked 21 days straight, 12 to 14-hour shifts, wondering whether or not there's a fatigue issue having them on a crane, swinging a load across a bunch of employees. Not to mention when we've seen spotters taken away so that we had reduced manning, so that they were less likely to pick up a hazard, but it was cheaper because we had to, the company didn't have to pay 5 people, they only had to pay 4 people. Every time I raised an issue with an employer around safety and improvements, there would always be a reaction of financially, it's going to cost too much. And that is just an insult to the OH&S Act and an insult to the employees that work in them workplaces. Now, I believe the McGowan government and the statement that the member opposite, the Honourable Jorn Sigma, referred to in respect of increased penalties will provide a real incentive to comply with workplace safety laws. They send a clear message about the importance of maintaining a safe workplace. Yes, they do. Because I can tell you, the last 8 years, there's been no message. There's been no message to workers saying that we're backing you in and we're going to fix these issues and make sure that there's not injuries and more fatalities happening in these workplaces. You can stand there and tell me that there's a statistic that shows that there's been a reduction in reports, that there's been not as many lost time injuries as we've seen in the past. On the Stena Clyde, we had 7 years without a lost time injury. And each time we hit 12 months, guess what? We all got a prize. But I can tell you now, there were the walking wounded on that rig, and I was one of them when I nearly chopped my finger off, and I was told by the OAM on that rig, you can tough it out for a week, otherwise it's going to wreck our 7-year LTI-free standard. What a shame that you see that sort of stuff happen, and that LTI-free mantra, they then use to go and tender for jobs. And I can tell you, most of them ones that I encountered on workplaces, you would see a stevedore whose job was to hook up and lash loads, who'd maybe done their wrist, in the administration building pushing paper with their wrist strapped up. Not a lost time injury because they're in the office, but that was an injury. Where is that reported? Where is it said that there was an injury that took place while they were lifting cargo? Well, hang on, it's not a lost time injury, so it doesn't count. So statistics will just go down, but meanwhile we've got the walking wounded who are labourers up there pushing paper. You know, it's amazing to think that, to hear that the culture has changed. Do I agree that the safety is better than what it was 100 years ago? Yes, of course. But so it should be, and it needs to be better. You know, there was another issue, another sad incident that took place while I was an organiser for the MUA. There was an incident on board a Scandi ship where a seafarer, rest in peace, Andrew Kelly, lost his life. Now, he was out in rough seas and the ship was directed to go in and do cargo work. They went in to do the cargo work. It was called off as they were heading out. People will say there was a huge wave that come through that was a freak wave, which, big swell, that's going to happen, right? Call it a freak wave. I think that's an insult. I think it was a wave that came with the swell of the day. And then you see the back of the ship come up, a container fly down the ship and ended up crushing Andy in between a skip bin. Now, when that ship came in, and I went down there with a counsellor for the members on that job, it was like chaos. We've seen regulators on board the ship going as fast as they can, and then the CEO of the company walks on. I've got my members downstairs who are distraught, currently getting assistance, and the CEO says, we need to sail the ship. We need to take the ship away from the wharf. Now, all the support and all the things you need for the investigation right alongside that wharf is critical to have it there, particularly until they finish the investigation. The guys were distraught. They were clearly in no state of mind to be working. And the CEO said they have to sail the ship. That's the direction. So to these guys' credit, we had a chat and they said, not a chance are we sailing this ship away from the port. It is not happening. And I swear to you right now, on the back deck still was the blood from Andrew Kelly. The CEO was down there with a broom and a bucket. The investigation hadn't even been completed and he wanted to get off the port. Now, it's costing him money to have the ship alongside that port, and he knows that the union has access to the ship while it's there. This is the gall that companies have. This is the culture that we see employers have today. Get in, get out, get on with the job, get back out there into the ocean and get the productivity moving. It's an absolute insult, and I think that when we look down at the crux of what we're looking at with these two bills now, I believe genuinely this is a real attempt to say to employers that we're coming. And we're looking at these, and we should have looked at them in 2010, 2011, 2012, all the way through. 8 years, nothing. But now we're going to try and move them, and you try to say that, oh, 8 months is a little bit long. Well, 8 years we waited, and you didn't even put any legislation on the table. Workers waited to hear something out of the Liberal National Government, and they got nothing. So I commend these bills to the House, and I genuinely believe that we will see some improvements, and if not, we will see the employers start to understand that there is a cost to not taking safety seriously. Thank you.